like I find myself talking to Jack sometimes, and it's like, I don't know, I'll see a picture of him, right? And it's because it hits you like you're getting smacked across the face out of nowhere. Even though it's been, over 2 years, certain days it hits you, and you're smacked back into this reality that you're like, he's supposed to be here. And then you go try to compose yourself. Sometimes I can't, and you feel sadness, then rage, because in Jack's case, everybody's different, but he didn't sign up to get fentanyl. He shouldn't have been. He shouldn't have been on Snapchat with somebody he doesn't know getting Xanax and Adderall or any pills. But if he had known they had fentanyl in them, I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have taken it. I had this conversation with him probably 3 or 4 months before, that night, saying, don't mess around, man. Because he had a history of taking other people's pills. And because he had anxiety and depression, which I believe all of this stems from. Now, again, I'm a father and a creative in marketing and a writer, but I think I know a little bit about my son. Like, when he was 9 and 10 years old, he spent 2 Januaries in a row in the hospital, and he learned there a terrible pain. They never figured out what it was. They called it some kind of neuropathy that was caused by an autoimmune disease that they couldn't figure out which one. Tested him for everything. But it was there they gave him pills, and that's where his brain went, pills equals I don't have to feel pain. So he had a lot of anxiety, and sometimes I feel guilty that when he would get anxious, I would get frustrated, because, of course, as a parent, you don't understand. You want to understand it, but yet you don't want to hear it all the time, because how could you be anxious? You have the perfect life, blah, blah, blah. And looking back, that's a regret hugely, that I didn't always. There were times I absolutely took his anxiety seriously, but there are sometimes I was like, today we're supposed to be going to, this and that. You can't be anxious. You can't be depressed. I have that regret a little bit at times, because the first thing you do when it happens is, what could I have done better? Where did it go wrong? I think every parent does this, I assume. I know that Kathy and I did, where it was like, where along the way could he come to that? And then I thought about the anxiety and depression, and then if, say, you have a drink or anything, and your decision-making changes entirely, because you don't want to feel uneasy. Dis-ease, if you break down disease, the word dis-ease is not at ease. And so that was his way of finding it, was hoping to get Xanax from a guy on Snapchat. And unfortunately, what he got was enough fentanyl to kill 4 grown men. Jack, and I'm happy I can smile when I say this, but Jack truly, and everybody, I'm sure, sees their child this way, as the nicest, most wonderful human being that ever was born. And you should, as a parent, think that, because, you want to reinforce the good things that they do. But he genuinely, he had empathy to the degree in which I wouldn't let him watch the news as he got older. But like when he was in 4th grade, there was a young girl who was in a wheelchair, and he saw her one day, and she would always get left behind. And so Jack, and I didn't certainly teach, he just something he intrinsically, just innately was in his heart. He said, from now on, I get to be the one that pushes Carly around. And suddenly that was like a little movement within the 4th grade class where they would fight over who got to push Carly. And getting a call from Carly's mother saying, I don't know what's changed, but your son has had a huge impact on my daughter, who was unfortunately born with a debilitating disease. And yeah, it was like, I always have had a dark sense of humor. And so I said, he must have gotten that from his mother. He couldn't have, but but then in seventh grade, I go to school for, they have these little awards that they give out, and I don't expect anything. He was super creative, so he used to draw like amazingly, to a point where I was like, you should continue doing this because you could be an artist someday. But when we went there, he won the award, the character award, for having the best character, and it made me very proud because everybody looked to him for comfort, and the irony in that was he was never comfortable with his anxiety and stuff like that, but he loved to comfort others. I just recently discovered about 5 gigs of video I did not know existed. We had a Mac, a Big Mac, whatever they called that, the iMac, and he was making his own videos pretending to be characters and stuff, and at that age, like 9, and he was doing like all these impressions and dancing.
That was the show for today. Thank you. Goodbye.
And just watching that was like the greatest gift from God or Jack, or that I found that. It was a year and a half after he left us. And Kathy still can't watch it. It's too hard for her, but I watch it, and I know where he's coming from because he had a great sense of humor. He really had timing. Like, he could say the exact thing you shouldn't say quietly in that moment, even at like 10. As he got older, of course, as you get older, you learn that kind of timing when you're not supposed to. It's like I call it mischievous humor. It was never horrible, but he had a brilliant sense of timing, and he just watching these videos brought that back. Like, he was just doing impressions of what he saw, and when I watched it, I was like, that is a 9-year-old's look at the America we live in. Music was huge in his life. Of course, he grew up with a dad who had 30 guitars in a music studio, and why wouldn't he like it? But my brother's a phenomenal guitar player, and they really like complex music. Like, Jack, I caught him listening to like Al Di Meola and Return to Forever, which was before my time. But it's like, he's like, Dad, isn't this stuff amazing? This guy, I'm like, no, it's boring. Where's the melody? Because I'm like a 3-chord slinger who just wants to hear a story. But he was technically like, I think he had perfect pitch, but he was technically so good, so fast, that he and my brother would get together and play solos. Because I was like, I don't know, the solos are boring. People want to hear a song. My point being, he was unique in the fact that my brother came over, he said, I felt like every time I talked to Jack, no matter what age he was, I was talking to somebody who had been here before.
I didn't know Jack as well as I would have liked to because I live in Arizona, but the times I was here visiting family, I couldn't wait to see Jack because he was one of the most colorful human beings I've ever met. This young man, to me, I know he had been here before. There's no way. He was so insightful and had knowledge way beyond his years. His personality was somebody I could hang out with all day long. And one common thing that we had as he grew up and I saw him become a young man is that he was a musician, a creative person. Who knew? Another creative McCarthy, and what a creative gentleman he was. And the way I wanted to bond with Jack and really get to develop our relationship was through this wonderful thing called guitar. And he was quite a musician. And I enjoyed myself. And he had asked me many times, Uncle K, could you maybe show me some of the blues? And we'd sit down and he'd play some technical things. I'm like, what are you, Stevie Vai or something? And I said, how about just some... he's like, wow, I like that. I like that. Show me how you do that. And that's kind of how I guess we regenerated our relationship. And each time I was here, and I miss him to death. And I know he's doing great things. He did great things here, how he influenced people. And I always define success as how do you make someone feel about themselves after they've met you. And Jack succeeded so many ways.
My daughter wrote a poem, actually, that at the first Fentanyl Fathers talk we gave, I couldn't read it because I couldn't. So she was there in the audience, and I said, Samantha, I can't do it. You should be reading this. It's your poem anyway. It was called Sweet Brother of Mine because he idolized Slash. And it took him like 2 years because he was like 13 when he started playing that lick in the beginning of Sweet Child of Mine. And that's all you heard when you came to the house was that guitar, the beginning. And, but he got it. So our journey in music was always there together. And then our love for mixed martial arts. And I never, I don't know how I say this, but just be brutally honest, I never thought I would be grateful for a pandemic. But he was a senior in high school, then a freshman in college during COVID. And so we were all locked in the house together. And those are, particularly his freshman year, he would have been off to school. And so that was the best time we had because we built like an MMA gym in my garage. And, you know, he wrestled in high school, and we had the best time kind of beating each other up, but pleasantly. And it was never angry, but it was a great workout. And I think the happiest I ever saw him was when, it's hard for me to even, this memory's great. I took him to a UFC fight in Detroit the first time, and God love Dana White. There's all these bigger kids. He must have been 14 at the time. He was scrambling to take a picture with him, and Dana White saw Jack. He's like, hey, kid, come here, because he was just getting trounced on. And Dana White grabbed him and took a picture with him, and then he said, you got it? And so Jack took like 3, and then a video, and it was really, you know, at that moment I was like, he is so happy. Like, what kid gets to do that? And then, you know, he met Kamaru Usman, who was a 170 champ. And I posted that on Instagram, the picture of Jack and Kamaru Usman. And Usman commented on it, liked it, and said, what a nice kid. So I thought, that is a bucket list thing for a 14-year-old who worships these guys who do this cage fighting. That's pretty violent, but you know, as a 14-year-old boy, those are heroes, you know. And then, of course, Conor McGregor came along. And if you're Irish, you have to like Conor McGregor. And so another great memory was seeing McGregor win the title together. We had sort of like this ritual where it was the only time I said no friends over. Were Saturday nights when we'd watch UFC fights. And we made it a thing. So we watched McGregor knock out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds, and we both cried. Literally. Because no Irish guy, nobody thought an Irish guy could ever make it that far. And so then his love for the UFC got bigger and bigger. So we went to Chicago, and we followed him to Vegas for one fight. And those memories I always say to people, I only had them for 19 years, but they were the best 19 years I could have ever asked for. We were truly, sometimes I wonder if it was too much buddy, best friends and not enough of being a father figure. And yeah, it's one of those things that I'm sometimes left to ponder when I am thinking about it and how I wish I could change it, but you can't. So Jack was a master, as most are that become addicted to anything, at deception of his feelings and where he was at most points. Everything's fine. No, I'm good. Are you sure? Because you don't seem good. You haven't come out of your room for a couple of days, or Or the opposite, he would work out like 3 times a day. You know what I mean? Which is great, but unnecessary. And so that was a sign. To anyone who judges, I probably overstated my questioning of friendship or father. I was a father for sure, and when I caught him for the first time with, I guess they would call it weed, but it's wax. I knew where to look because he was a guitar player. I play guitar in the back of the amplifier because he was acting funny. It didn't make him act stoned like back in my day. It more made him aggressive because it's like pure. I don't know because I'm so far removed from drugs and alcohol or anything. But and so I became a father for sure then because I knew he'd never even seen me drink. So I knew that he something wasn't right. And I knew that couldn't have helped his anxiety because it made him like this. Had him peeing in a cup every week, which he didn't love, but that was the only way I knew that I could. Because as a parent, all you want to do is keep your kids safe. So you'll do whatever it takes, right? Until they get to a certain age when they can drive and they get 17, 18, 19. And then, so yeah, we had the conversation about counterfeit pills. Oh yeah, I'd never think about that. But when you've maybe had a beer and you get on Snapchat and you see somebody has what you think are Xanax, you think that's a good idea. It was around 10 o'clock at night. Again, I was in Indiana. And he said to Kathy, I'm going to Justin's house. I'll be back by midnight. Okay, Justin's a great kid, know his family. Well, he left at 10 and came back at like 10:45. And so then Kathy thought, oh, he's home early, good. I don't have to worry anymore and go to sleep. And she came down the next morning to find him resting against the kitchen island, right across from the coffee maker, kind of slunched over. He wasn't laid out flat. He was slunched over. And then, she felt him some, and he was gone. And my daughter was there. And then I think probably shortly thereafter, that's when I got the call. And it's never a joke, right? So I knew it wasn't a joke, but I didn't want to believe it. And so it's a weird thing because I can't remember a lot of it. I might have passed out, and one of my coworkers, one of the camera guys I work with, came out to the parking lot because he heard me screaming. And I think might have been banging my head against the pavement because I was just so gutted, and it was my biggest. Take your biggest fear and amplify it by 1,000,000, and that was it. I guess it wasn't believable. I wouldn't believe it until I had to. It was the longest 4-hour drive back to Michigan. Thank God for John Matosky, who wouldn't let me drive because I was just going to drive. He's like, you shouldn't drive. I just, it's that moment, just hearing that and thinking about it now, it just brings back we had so much to do, he had so much to do, and all over a tiny little pill that he thought would make him more at ease, turns out killed him. You go from sadness to rage because you can't believe that there are people out there that would. And this is my naivety, I guess, but you can't believe there are people out there that would say, yeah, here, I'll sell you a Xanax for whatever, and knowingly have it be laced with fentanyl. Like, what kind of person does that? And so the rage was there for probably the first 6 months, and then I one day realized that it's probably not healthy to walk around looking for people that look like drug dealers hoping to become a vigilante, which is why they didn't tell me Aaron Miranda's name in the beginning. But yeah, the amount of times I have replayed what if I had been home, maybe he wouldn't have. I often fall asleep downstairs, or I'm up late. I would have been right there. Could I have done something? And you can drive yourself crazy, as I probably have. But it was just that moment. Is a moment that it's one of those things that I can only imagine the PTSD that Kathy and Samantha have finding him there physically, but not being there at the same time, and where I was. Like anytime I get a phone call, I like don't want to answer it, because I'm afraid that it just somebody's gone, you know. It's going to be really hard. But I had a dream probably about a month and a half after. And I'm not one to believe in a lot of things. Like when my mom sends me the horoscope for the week, I think it's cute, but I don't believe it. But I had a dream, and it was so vivid and real. And he came to me in the dream. And he said, "I'm sorry. I screwed up. I didn't mean it. But I'm okay." And I was just so happy to see him. I didn't want the dream to end. And I hugged him, and I said, like I wanted to touch him, and it was so real, unlike any dream I've ever had. And because I'd often, I think back to that, and I so many things happen in life, and I always think, what would Jack think about this? What would Jack feelings be about this? Because we had such a great relationship, and I know that. I know for sure that dream meant something that I needed to know, and that is that 100%. Like it was a way for me to feel and know that it was a mistake, and kids get to make mistakes and learn from them, and that's where I get a bit angry sometimes, because Jack didn't get to learn from that. What's left is pain, meeting other parents who've gone through the same thing, seeing their pain, and watching other parents like myself talk about it. I get it, and there's no other pain like it that I can imagine. It's sort of like, it's out of order. You're supposed to go before your children. And so the dream, I guess, was what, not that it doesn't make it easier, because every day I think every morning I wake up, before I'm actually awake, I have to realize that he's not here. And it's no fun to wake up that way at all, because sometimes I've woken up where I'm like, I get to see where Jack is, and then it hits me that I can't. And I have to go back to that dream sort of to feel a little bit better. But the truth is, I don't. Someone once told me, oh, it gets easier. And it doesn't. And it doesn't get easier. It's the same as it was. I suppose I've let myself smile a few times since then, but it's always there. It's like the lump in your throat, or the feeling in your chest, or that when you think about it, that, like sometimes they call it butterflies or nervous stomach, or it drops. Not a day goes by I don't have that. And think of all the things I would do in order to get him back. Because life will never be the same without him. A grieving parent is the most dangerous person you'll meet, because you've already taken from them what their reason to live. Now, I have a daughter, so I shouldn't say that, but the angry part of me, for a while walked around looking for that. I've thankfully been able to know that that's not the right decision to do something. Leave it up to the FBI, the local law enforcement, everybody got involved in that, because Snapchat had to give up all of their records. Apple, Verizon, AT&T. It took a long time to get all that. And I read the Snapchat, which was very hard. I found out Aaron Miranda's name. Other people knew it long before, but they were doing themselves and me a favor, because I probably wouldn't have rationally behaved. I got to know the detective on the case, and I kept wondering why he would only call Kathy to give her updates on the case. But now I know, and I've been able to talk to him, and I got to see pictures of this guy's room. He had 11 guns on the wall. They had body armor. They lived in this place in Detroit, and it was, it was like a scene out of Sicario. So I went to the trial that he was supposed to show up to, the first day of discovery, and the detective said he's not coming because they made a mistake by giving him a personal bond and didn't put a tether on him, but hopefully they'll find him. If he is found and put in prison where he belongs, it doesn't bring Jack back. It doesn't. That's what I think the day I woke up. I'm like, I'm focused too much on this guy, because as much as I want him to realize, what a horrific human being he is, it doesn't bring Jack back. So it's a focus of energy that I've tried to get past. It's been hard, but I feel I have. Karma works things out. The universe has a way of creating order. So I'm certain that he'll find his own destiny when he least expects it. There's a lot of parents, particularly in the area where he was. Jack drove 20 minutes from where he lives to not a great neighborhood in Detroit, and to get 4 or 5 pills, and to a place that looked, I don't know. I would want to walk in there, who knows how many other kids that we don't know about, whose parents might think it was an overdose, or never had a toxicology report, or maybe didn't have parents. I don't know. I'm just saying there's a ton of. I just think about that all the time. I'm like, and I would say more, but it's still a case, but it wasn't the first time that he was caught with fentanyl. So even talking about it, I can feel myself like, but I've tried to let that go because I can't, it's between law enforcement and criminals. I'm Jack's father and Samantha's father, and my mother's still alive. I have 5 brothers and sisters, so I don't need to be doing that. I offered to, though. I offered the detective, and he begged me, please don't. But that's how you know, as a protective parent, I guarantee you that you could ask many moms or dads, and they would all say, I would love to be able to find, most of the time that person is never even recognized because they're just off into the ether. But in this case, we know exactly who it is and everything about him. Any pills that aren't from your pharmacist or your doctor, you should assume that they're going to kill you. Because I think now 8 and 10 have fentanyl in them. Other drugs also have fentanyl, cocaine, whatever. All those things. I am one that is more focused on counterfeit pills because it seems that much more divisive and evil because, listen, like, everybody has tried drugs in their life. Some people, unfortunately, become full-blown addicts, and I think that they get a stigma that they shouldn't because, again, I think it goes back to anxiety and depression. They're not trying to get high. They're trying to feel normal. You know what I mean? There's a pain they have that you don't know. And so I think in Jack's case, I think what I would tell parents, kids, it's Russian roulette, right? Would you take a 6-shooter and put 5 bullets in it, spin it around and stick it to your head? You'd never do that. So why would you buy pills from somebody you've never met in your life on the internet? And believe me, I'm sure there will be people that see this and say, well, you didn't know well, he was 19. Should I be snooping into my 19-year-old's Snapchat, having no clue that that's even out there? And we had the conversation about counterfeit pills and not to mess with them. He was, I wouldn't do that. But I think if you've ever, which I'm sure you have, if you talk to anybody who has an addiction or tends to go to put themselves at ease with whether it's alcohol, Xanax, or heroin, they're not going to tell you about it. They're going to, you know what I mean? They're magicians at hiding it. And like any parent, I wanted to believe that he wouldn't do that. We believe what we want to believe because it's our kids, and we love them too much. In Jack's whole life, he never hurt a fly and never wanted to do harm to anyone else. And so, and he wasn't really a good liar, so he didn't lie much. But when it comes to things like being addicted to something as anything, it changes or even if you believe you need it in order to feel normal, if you're not technically an addict, I don't know. But I think you'll lie to yourself. And I also think when you're that age, you think you're invincible, infallible. And unfortunately, it's only with age that we realize that we're not at all. You know, having to grieve is I don't know how many steps there are, to be honest. I lost track. Acceptance being the toughest one. But I had the great fortune, I went and saw a friend of mine, James McNulty, who had just, out of his garage, during the pandemic, built an ode to his grandfather and his father and made a pub out of it. Really beautiful, too, like all wooden, and it was all the Irish, like some things he brought in from Ireland. And he's the kind of guy who can see through the tough guy BS. You know, how you doing? Ah, great. You know, everything's good. He looked at me, and I couldn't hide it, and he saw me, and he played this song, and it was all about believing in God and believing. It was almost like it was Jack singing the words to me, like everything's gonna be, I'm okay. And so right there, and this is a guy I grew up with, you know, and I fell to my knees and I just couldn't take it. And this is a guy that he's special. I call him a bit of magic. It's like he is in touch with a different level of belief and faith. And he said, I don't know why, I'm just a vehicle. He said, but I want you to meet somebody. And the next thing I knew, say it was a month later or so, he said, I want you to meet my friend Greg Swan. And okay. And I think you two will hit it off. And he didn't tell me everything because I think he knew I wasn't ready yet to talk to other grieving parents. I didn't want to do that thing. And that's perfectly a great thing to do, by the way, after a while. Just in the beginning, I just didn't. I was in denial. I've lost. And I walked into a hotel lobby that had a bar where we were meeting. Ironically, none of us drink. Well, I think James drinks, but Greg and I don't drink. And I met Greg, and he told me about his son, Drew. I immediately started crying. I'd never cried in my life because I come from the generation where you're not whatever. You're not a man if you cry. Now, yeah. And now I realize that crying's the most exhausting thing. I could run a marathon and be less tired. Crying's exhausting when your heart's being ripped out and stomped on. And so I cried when I met Greg, and he looked at me and said, so I was thinking that we both have this purpose aligned, and we're both fathers, and what if we do this thing like fentanyl fathers? And he had it kind of worked out. And I realized in that moment, I'm like, purpose. I can actually do something, the worst thing that's ever happened to me, I can take and try to do something so that no other parent has to go through it. And selfishly, I get to continue to talk about Jack because as a parent that loses a child, you never want his story to go away. You keep him close, and you sometimes can even have fun talking, about the fun times and stories. And so next thing I knew, Greg, we had a great meeting, hugged. This will be awesome. And then like 2 days later, we were on a conference call with a couple of other, I think Greg's other son, Jack, who's a great guy, and a guy named Bob Madotti, and I think Sandy Snodgrass might have been on that call. And it just clicked. And we decided we were going to be like the Beatles. Of course, I demanded to be John Lennon because, everybody needs a prima donna on the group. But joking. But and so then it was what's our mission? We want to talk to how many high schools are there in the United States? 25,000. We're going to talk to all of them because that's where it starts. Getting the education out there that this is real. Some people that I've worked with within doing some of the assemblies don't like it when I call fentanyl a weapon of mass destruction, but it is because it's killed more people than weapons of mass destruction. So wars, right? 9/11, like it's killed more people than that. So it is. and maybe they don't like it when I say that because it becomes a political thing, and I'm very apolitical. I don't know, but it also gives us a reason, our military, to get involved if we had to. Because whether it is Americans or non-Americans that are bringing it into the country, we know where it's coming from and being made and pressed. And we know who benefits. It's kind of like a mission, like we're not going to stop until and it may sound naive, but you have to be a little bit crazy to believe you can do something that big that there'll never be another fentanyl death. But if that isn't your goal, then why bother? And so, we did an assembly, I think 2 months after we started. It's hard to get into high schools, but we figured it out. And once we did one, then they realized what we knew we were talking about, unfortunately, because you just tell a personal story, and kids respond. I never saw one cell phone in any talks I've given. And I assume always there's going to be, particularly if I'm talking not about that. People look on their cell phone now all the time. It's a distraction thing. But, Greg's gone around since then and done a ton in Florida. I think altogether, Texas, Florida, Ohio, and Michigan. And there's more that I probably can't think of in this moment. But it's very cathartic for me to stand on stage with Greg, since we're kind of the co-founders of it. I love telling Jack's story, particularly everything that came before that night, because I always felt so lucky to have such a great kid. I don't think he ever got in trouble. It was. And I keep thinking about you saying what people will say on YouTube, but those are keyboard warriors. They wouldn't say it to my face, because why would they do that? And I think that there's a fine line between being a parent and loving your child so much and having so much in common with them that you actually are friends. And I wouldn't change a thing other than him hooking up with Aaron Miranda on Snapchat. Because the truth is, it's really easy to cry. And you do a lot of it, and sometimes you've done so much of it, you can't. You feel like... is this what hell is like?